On the night of our company's anniversary, I expected celebration. Instead, my dad demanded I hand over all my company's shares to my brother. When I refused, he slapped me so hard the room went silent. Crying outside, I made one call, the call that changed everything. My name is Rachel Carter. I am 27 years old, and I live in Dallas, Texas. Ever since I graduated college, I have worked in my family's business, Carter Trading Company. It wasn't something handed to me as a gift. I put in the hours, day after day, handling clients, managing the accounts, and making sure the small details that kept the company running were never ignored. For years, I believed that hard work and honesty would one day earn me the right to lead. I wanted to take Carter Trading into the future, to grow it, and to do it in a fair way. That dream was what pushed me out of bed every morning. My dad, Thomas Carter, has always been the head of the company. He is in his late 50s now, but his presence is still sharp and heavy, like a storm that could break at any second. He is strict, controlling, and rarely offers a kind word. Growing up, I tried many times to win his approval. I studied harder, I worked longer, I stayed later at the office, hoping that he would notice and say he was proud. But the truth was clear even back then. My dad's pride was reserved for someone else. That someone was my older brother, Mark Carter. Mark is 32, and from as long as I can remember, he has been the favored child. He walked into the company and received privileges without earning them. While I kept my head down, working late into the night, Mark enjoyed shortcuts. He didn't worry about fairness or effort. He just expected power and respect because he was the chosen one. And my dad gave it to him. No matter what mistakes he made, there was always an excuse ready. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that if I just kept pushing, eventually my time would come. The company's anniversary celebration was supposed to be one of those nights when effort is acknowledged, when all of us could take pride in what we had built. Employees, business partners, family members, everyone was gathered at the office to mark another successful year. I walked in wearing my best smile, telling myself that maybe this night would be different. Maybe my dad would finally see me. Instead, it became the worst day of my life. When the speeches began, I stood near the front with the other employees, clapping politely, my heart beating with a nervous kind of hope. Then my dad turned to me, his voice cutting through the room. He demanded that I hand over all of my shares in the company to Mark. At first, I thought I had misheard him. The words didn't make sense. My shares were my proof, the result of years of sweat and long nights. To give them away would mean I had nothing, that my years of loyalty and effort meant nothing at all. I felt the eyes of the room turn toward me, waiting for my response. I managed to steady my voice, even though my chest was tight. I told him no. I could not give away what I had earned. The silence that followed was unbearable, broken only by my dad's footsteps as he moved closer. His face was red with fury, his voice shaking with rage. Before I could say anything else, his hand struck my face. The slap echoed in the room, shocking me more than the sting itself. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he kicked me, pushing me toward the door. His words were sharp, final. Never come back here again. The crowd was silent. No one moved to defend me. Not even Mark, who stood by with a smirk that told me he had gotten exactly what he wanted. I stumbled outside, my face burning, my pride torn into pieces. The night air felt heavy, pressing against me as I stood on the steps, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child. It wasn't just the slap, or even the public humiliation. It was the betrayal. The realization that my own dad had chosen not only to side against me, but to strip me of my dignity in front of everyone. For a long moment I stood there, broken, unable to move. But slowly, through the tears and the shaking, another feeling began to grow. Anger. I had been hurt, yes, but I refused to let them erase me. If they wanted to throw me away, I would show them that I was not so easily destroyed. That night, when I finally made it back to my apartment, I picked up the phone. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady enough when I dialed the number I knew by heart. Ethan Brooks. Ethan is my fiancé. He is 30 years old and a lawyer here in Dallas. He has always been level-headed, brave, and someone who believed in me even when my family did not. When he answered, his voice calm and familiar, I let everything pour out. I told him about the anniversary celebration, about how my dad had demanded my shares, how he had slapped me and thrown me out. My voice cracked when I explained the betrayal, the humiliation, the way Mark had stood there enjoying every second. And then I told Ethan something I had never fully said out loud. I suspected that my dad and Mark were hiding things, that the company wasn't as clean as it looked. For a moment, Ethan was quiet, just listening. Then he spoke in that steady, reassuring tone I had always trusted. "Rachel," he said, "you don't have to go through this alone. If they've wronged you, we'll fight back the right way. Let's find the truth." Those words were the spark I needed. In that moment, through the tears and the anger, I felt a shift. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had a path forward. Calling Ethan, choosing to take action instead of letting my dad's cruelty destroy me, that was the turning point. I didn't know then how deep the secrets ran, or how dangerous the truth would turn out to be. All I knew was that the battle had just begun. And this time, I wasn't going to back down. The next morning I woke up with swollen eyes from all the crying. My cheek still carried a faint red mark from my dad's hand, but the real wound was inside me. I couldn't erase the sound of his voice, the echo of his words telling me never to come back. For a few minutes I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if everything I had worked for was gone. Then I remembered Ethan's voice from the night before, steady and sure, telling me we could find the truth. That thought gave me the strength to sit up and face the day. Ethan came over not long after. He didn't waste time with long speeches or empty comfort. He just sat across from me at the kitchen table, his hand resting on mine, and asked, "Are you ready to do this?" I nodded, even though I was nervous. Taking on my own family felt terrifying, but at that point I knew there was no other choice. If I stayed silent, my dad and Mark would walk all over me, and I would lose everything I had worked for. We started with the documents I had access to. Over the years, I had handled many contracts, invoices, and bank statements for the company. I kept copies of some of them in my email and in files at home. I never thought they would serve any purpose other than routine work, but now they became the starting point of our investigation. Ethan studied each page carefully, his lawyer's mind catching details I had overlooked. Numbers that didn't add up, contracts that seemed suspicious, payments that had no clear explanation. "Rachel," he said, pointing to one of the papers, "this isn't just sloppy bookkeeping. This looks deliberate. Someone is hiding money." Hearing him confirm my suspicions made my stomach twist. I had felt for a long time that things weren't right, but now I had real proof that something bigger was happening. We decided to dig deeper. Ethan used his legal contacts to request public records and business filings. I reached out quietly to a few employees I trusted, people who had always respected me but weren't close to my dad or Mark. One of them, a woman from accounting named Sarah, agreed to meet me at a coffee shop away from the office. She looked nervous as she sat across from me, glancing over her shoulder before speaking. "Rachel," she whispered, "I don't know if I should be telling you this. Your dad and Mark, they've been moving money around. Big amounts. It never shows up in the official books, but I've seen wires to strange accounts. When I asked questions, I was told to keep quiet." Her words confirmed what Ethan and I had already begun to suspect. My dad and brother weren't just running the company unfairly, they were involved in illegal activities. As I listened, a mix of anger and sadness filled me. The company I had loved and worked for was being used as a tool for crime. And the people behind it were the very ones who had betrayed me. Ethan stayed calm as always, though I could see the fire in his eyes. "This is enough to start building a case," he told me later that evening. "But we'll need more. We have to be thorough, or they'll find a way to slip through the cracks." The following weeks were a blur of late nights and secret meetings. Ethan and I pieced together documents, testimony, and financial records. Every new discovery made the picture clearer. Fraudulent accounts, fake contracts, clients cheated, partners misled. My dad and brother had built a web of lies, and now that web was beginning to unravel. But with every step forward, I felt the weight of fear pressing on me. These were my own blood. Thomas Carter wasn't just a businessman, he was my dad. Mark wasn't just a rival, he was my brother. Sometimes at night, when I was alone, I would wonder if I was doing the right thing. Was I betraying them the way they had betrayed me? The thought of seeing them face prison made me sick, even though I knew it was their own choices that had brought them there. Ethan never let me drown in doubt. One evening, as we sat reviewing evidence, he looked straight at me and said, "Rachel, remember what they did to you. Remember how your dad humiliated you and tried to erase you. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about justice. If you don't stop them, they'll keep hurting people and they'll get away with it." His words anchored me. He was right. Justice had to come first, no matter how painful it was. The tension between me and my family grew heavier each day. My dad called a few times, demanding to know why I hadn't returned to the office. I ignored his calls. Mark sent a message once, short and cold. "You made a mistake. Don't push this further." I deleted it, but the threat lingered in my mind. Ethan reassured me that as long as we stayed focused and careful, the law was on our side. He began preparing legal filings, drafting complaints, and lining up witnesses. I helped him organize the evidence, each piece of paper feeling like a weapon against the people who had cast me out. One night, as we sat surrounded by stacks of files, I looked at Ethan and whispered, "Do you think we'll win?" He leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady. "Rachel, we don't go into this to lose. We're going to bring the truth out, no matter how hard they try to hide it." His confidence gave me strength, but deep down, I knew the road ahead would not be easy. My dad had power, money, and influence. Mark had his arrogance and his willingness to cross any line. They wouldn't surrender quietly. If anything, the more we uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Still, there was no turning back. I had taken the first step the night I called Ethan, and now we were in the middle of a battle I had never imagined fighting. The betrayal had cut me deeply, but it had also given me purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing my dad's approval or competing with my brother's shadow. I was standing for myself, for the company I had poured my life into, and for the truth that could no longer stay buried. But even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was waiting ahead. The evidence was strong, but my dad and brother were not the kind of men to sit back while their empire crumbled. I knew in my heart that the next move would not come from us, but from them. And when it did, everything we had built so far would be tested. The weeks that followed felt like walking through a storm. Ethan and I had built a strong case, but we both knew my dad and brother wouldn't sit quietly while we pulled the ground out from under them. The silence from their side almost made it worse. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like the air before lightning splits the sky. I kept waiting for something to happen, and when it did, it came harder than I expected. One evening, I was leaving the grocery store when a black SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and Mark leaned out, his grin sharp and cold. "You really think you can win this?" he sneered. "You're not as smart as you think, Rachel. Drop it now, or you'll regret it." His words cut into me, but I didn't let him see my fear. I just walked to my car, my hand shaking as I turned the key. When I told Ethan what happened, he clenched his jaw but stayed calm. "That was a threat," he said firmly. "And it means we're getting close to something they don't want exposed. We're going to report this, and we're going to keep pushing." His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his eyes. He was worried for me, and so was I. The next day, Ethan filed a motion to secure the documents we had uncovered. He wanted them protected in court records so they couldn't be destroyed. That step gave me a little relief, but it also escalated the fight. My dad finally called me, his voice heavy with anger. "Rachel, you're making a fool of yourself. You think some lawyer fiancé of yours can touch me? I built this company. You're nothing without me. Stop this now before you lose more than you already have." I listened in silence, letting his words hang. When he paused, I answered simply, "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Dad. The truth will come out." Then I hung up. My hand shook afterward, but my heart felt strangely lighter. Saying those words to him, standing up to him for once, gave me strength I didn't know I had. Ethan and I spent long nights preparing for hearings. I remember one evening in particular. We sat at my dining table, surrounded by papers. The room was quiet except for the scratching of Ethan's pen and the hum of the fridge. I looked up at him and whispered, "Sometimes I still feel guilty, like I'm betraying them." He set his pen down and looked at me with steady eyes. "Rachel, betrayal is what they did to you. What we're doing is justice. Don't confuse the two." His words settled deep in me. I replayed the night of the anniversary in my mind, the slap, the humiliation, the betrayal in front of everyone. I remembered the tears, the anger, the decision to fight. I held on to those memories as fuel. As the first hearing approached, the tension grew sharper. The courtroom was cold the morning we walked in, and my chest tightened when I saw my dad and Mark sitting with their lawyers. My dad's eyes were hard, his jaw tight, but he still carried that air of confidence, as if nothing could touch him. Mark leaned back in his chair with a smirk, like this was just another game. Ethan spoke for us with calm strength, presenting the evidence piece by piece. I sat beside him, my hands folded tightly, trying to steady my breath. When Sarah, the accountant, took the stand and testified about the hidden money, I saw my dad's face tighten. It was the first crack in his mask, but they fought back hard. Their lawyers questioned everything, tried to paint me as a bitter daughter inventing lies for revenge. At one point, Mark leaned forward and whispered across the aisle, "This isn't over." His words made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to keep looking straight ahead. When the judge agreed to let the case proceed to a full trial, I felt a rush of relief mixed with fear. We had cleared the first hurdle, but the real battle was still ahead. My dad and brother would not give in easily. I knew they would try every trick to bury the truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, their questions flying toward me. I didn't stop to answer. I wasn't ready to turn this into a public show. Ethan guided me through the crowd, his hand firm on mine. Once we were in the car, he said quietly, "They're on the defensive now." "That's good. But we have to be ready for what comes next." At night, I sometimes lay awake listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. My mind would drift to memories of childhood, family dinners, birthdays, moments when I believed my dad cared for me. Those memories hurt now, tangled with betrayal. I realized I was grieving not just for the company or for my dignity, but for the family I thought I had. Still, the thought of giving up never crossed my mind. Ethan and I had come too far. The evidence was solid, the witnesses strong. Each day that passed brought us closer to the truth being laid bare in front of everyone. Yet in the quiet moments, I couldn't ignore the sense that danger was closing in. Mark's threats, my dad's rage, the powerful lawyers they had hired, it all pointed to a storm building. We were standing against men who had money, influence, and nothing left to lose. Ethan reminded me constantly that the law was on our side, but even he admitted this case was unlike anything he had faced before. "They'll try to break you, Rachel," he told me one night as we sorted through documents. "But you can't let them. You have more strength than you realize." His faith in me became my anchor. With each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, less afraid. Betrayal had once left me broken and weeping outside the office doors. Now it fueled me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every employee they had cheated, every client they had lied to, every truth they had buried under years of corruption. But deep down, I knew we hadn't seen their full play yet. My dad and Mark were cornered, and cornered men don't surrender quietly. Something was coming. I could feel it. And when it came, it would test everything Ethan and I had built so far. The trial moved forward faster than I expected. Each day felt heavier, filled with new filings, witness statements, and tense hearings. I found myself sitting across from my dad and brother in the courtroom again and again, the weight of their glares pressing against me. My dad's face was carved in stone, showing no regret, only anger at being challenged. Mark looked restless, almost reckless, as if he couldn't stand the thought of losing control. I had to remind myself constantly that they were the ones who had betrayed me, not the other way around. The evidence we presented grew stronger with every session. Bank statements, contracts, hidden accounts, it all painted a picture of fraud that was impossible to ignore. Employees came forward, some reluctantly, some relieved, telling the truth about what they had seen. Sarah's testimony was powerful, but she wasn't the only one. A former client testified about being cheated, his voice trembling with anger as he described how he lost money in a false deal orchestrated by Mark. Each voice, each document, was like another brick in the wall closing in on my dad and brother. But they didn't sit back quietly. Their lawyers attacked me personally, questioning my motives. They tried to make me sound bitter, like a jealous daughter who couldn't accept her dad's authority. One day, in the middle of questioning, my dad's lawyer said, "Rachel, isn't this all just because you were embarrassed? Isn't this revenge against your dad for choosing your brother over you?" I took a deep breath and answered clearly, "No. This is not about embarrassment. This is about truth. My dad and my brother used this company to commit crimes. I am here to stop them, not because I want revenge, but because justice demands it." My voice shook a little, but I could feel the words hit the room. For the first time, my dad's eyes shifted. He looked away, even if just for a second. Outside of court, the pressure built too. Mark continued with his threats. Once, after a hearing, he leaned in close as we passed in the hallway and hissed, "You don't know what you've started. We'll burn everything down before we let you win." His words chilled me, but they also showed his desperation. He wasn't in control anymore, and he knew it. Ethan remained steady, guiding me through every step. At night, when exhaustion pulled at me, he would remind me of how far we had come. "Rachel," he'd say, "they tried to erase you. But here you are, standing strong. Don't forget that." His faith kept me from collapsing under the weight of it all. The turning point came when we uncovered the final piece of evidence, documents showing offshore accounts linked directly to my dad and Mark. Ethan explained that this was the missing link, the proof that tied everything together. When he presented it in court, I watched the judge's face change. It was the moment the truth became undeniable. The verdict didn't come right away, but I could feel it building. The air in the courtroom grew heavier with each passing day. And then, finally, the decision was delivered. The assets of Carter Trading Company were to be taken from Thomas and Mark Carter and transferred under legal management until new leadership was decided. Both of them were found guilty of multiple financial crimes and sentenced to prison. The words echoed in my ears. Prison. My dad and brother, the men who had once stood at the center of my world, were being led away in handcuffs. The image was almost too much to take in. Part of me wanted to collapse under the weight of it. Another part felt a rush of relief, so sharp it almost hurt. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I looked up at the sky. The air felt different, lighter somehow. I had fought through betrayal, humiliation, and fear, and I had come out standing. The company I had poured my life into was no longer theirs to destroy. Justice had been served, not just for me, but for everyone they had hurt. But even as I stood there, watching the reporters swarm and the cameras flash, I felt something else lingering inside me. This wasn't the kind of victory that left you celebrating. It was heavy, complicated. My dad was still my dad, and Mark was still my brother. Their betrayal had cut so deep that even justice couldn't erase the scar. Ethan walked beside me, his hand steady on mine. "It's over," he said quietly. I nodded, but inside I knew it wasn't completely over. Betrayal leaves echoes, shadows that follow you long after the fight is done. I had won the battle, yes, but the story of my family was not something I could shut away so easily. As we drove away from the courthouse, I stared out the window at the city I had always called home. Dallas looked the same, the streets busy and bright, but for me, everything had changed. I wasn't the daughter begging for approval anymore. I wasn't the sister waiting in the shadows. I was Rachel Carter, the woman who stood up against her own family and refused to be erased. And yet, even in victory, one question stayed with me. What would betrayal leave behind once the dust settled? That was something only time would answer.